In this video, I'm going to show you how you can create an AI brainstorming app using the InfraNodus API. InfraNodus is a visual text analysis tool that I developed, and one of the most powerful features of this tool is the ability to detect gaps in any discourse. So here, for example, I have a collection of my ideas in Obsidian note-taking app, and InfraNodus can very easily identify the topics that I have in those documents and find that there is a gap between them. And then what it does is that it proposes a research question using the built-in AI that bridges those gaps together. And this is usually a source of really amazing, innovative ideas. And these insights are now available through the API. So in this video, I'm going to show you how you can integrate those insights into your automation workflows. Here I have a workflow that I created using make.com, where it collects the news of the day. So it's an RSS feed on the news about AI, and then it sends them to the InfraNodus API and then detects an interesting research question, which it then sends to my Telegram bot. And then I have a Telegram bot here that sends me every 2 hours an interesting question about the news of the day, which is a really great way of engaging with news because I can suddenly start thinking about interesting connections I wouldn't have thought of before. I don't even have to read the news, I just already focus on the actual questions that I can come up with that can help me develop new ideas or products. And then in the second example, I'm going to show you how you can use the API via RapidAPI, where we have our endpoints available to generate research questions. And in this example, I'm going to show you how I generate questions to the support portal, the website where we have a lot of articles about how InfraNodus works. And this is really great for product development because basically on that website, we have a collection of documents about how InfraNodus works. And here, using this API, I can generate an interesting question that can help me develop this product further. So you will see how all this works, and I will show you how you can integrate it into your own AI workflows. Also, please subscribe to this channel so that this video can get recommended to other people interested in this content and to support us as well. All right, so let's get into it. First of all, I will show you how InfraNodus works if you don't know it yet. Here I have an example of an InfraNodus plugin in Obsidian, a note-taking app. And basically, the way that InfraNodus works is that it visualizes the text. So here I have a collection of ideas on a certain topic. I visualize them as a graph. That allows me to see what are the main concepts inside, how they relate to one another, and also the main topics inside this content. And then it uses network analysis to identify the concepts and the topics with the most influence, right? And then using this approach, I can detect the gaps. And based on those gaps, so I can see that there is, for example, 2 topics here. I'm researching trauma response and ideogram exploration, which exist in my discourse, but that are not very well connected. And this is usually where good ideas emerge, because when you start thinking about how you can connect topics together in an interesting way, you will usually come up with really interesting insights. And this is exactly what happens here. I look at those 2 topics. If I know the content, I can generate the insight myself. I can also ask the built-in AI to generate a question that would link those 2 topics together. So here we have ideogram exploration, trauma response, and here's telling me how can the integration of fractal movement ideograms into data analytics enhance understanding and improvement of myokine production for physical resilience. This is great, very specific, very relevant to the content I'm working on. In fact, I'm going to save this question to my notes because I find it super interesting. I don't want to lose it after. All right, let's get back to how it actually can work via the InfraNodus API. So the first example I want to show you is that I have these scenarios, workflows inside the tool that's called make.com. You can get access to it through our API page as well. We already have ready-made scenarios that you can use. And in this particular scenario, what happens is that I get an RSS feed of the news of the day on the topic of AI. I use an app that's called rss.app to create my own custom RSS feeds for the topics I like. So in this case, it's just news sources on AI. And then I tell it that I want maximum 100 results. And then what happens, you have like a few steps that you have to add here to convert those RSS results into readable format, JSON, and then you send that JSON to the InfraNodus endpoint inside make.com. Don't worry, you will not have to build all that. We already have ready-made scenarios, which you can just reuse. You will just need to put your API key into InfraNodus, and you will obviously need an RSS feed that you like. But you can test it on the news of the day from New York Times, for example, or something like that. And then what happens here in this workflow is that once the answer is generated by InfraNodus AI, I also send it to ChatGPT additionally, and I ask it to kind of like choose one of the 3 questions that it likes the most, because it generates 3 questions, and to provide me links to it. But you don't have to have this step. You can also just get the answers directly from InfraNodus AI. But the question itself, actually ChatGPT here has an instruction to actually keep the question of InfraNodus. I just use it to make sure it chooses the best one, and that it also shows me the news sources from where these questions come. And then it sends me the result on my Telegram bot, and every 2 hours I receive into this chat some interesting research questions. And just for the sake of testing, I created another workflow here that does the same thing, but just using only ChatGPT. So here you see there's another workflow. It just uses ChatGPT, and I basically gave it the same instruction, but without using InfraNodus, right? So I can compare the results. I'm telling it here in the first instruction that you need to look at the news of the day, the RSS feed that you receive, and to provide think of a gap and then generate some questions that would potentially bridge this gap. And then the same node that I have in the previous workflow, where it kind of combines the answers and provides the link. So it's just to format the response basically better, and then send it to the same bot. So in my bot here, I have 2 answers coming every 2 hours. One is with InfraNodus. It's this one that lists the topic, because InfraNodus also provides the actual topics. And then another one is this automatically generated one by the same GPT-4o model, right? So I also have an ability to compare the responses. And what I see here from using it already for a month is that the answers, the questions generated by InfraNodus are much more interesting than the questions generated by GPT-4, because each time InfraNodus generates a question, it looks at this gap between the topics. So it lists me the 2 topics, in this case it's leadership dynamics and student balance, right? And then it tells me, okay, how can AI-driven leadership practices in executive teams enhance the ability of students to balance school responsibilities with stress and create a sustainable learning environment? So that's interesting, because it's asking how we can bring leadership practices that are used in AI companies into school settings. And that's like a very interesting question, actually, that we could take a lot of time to research and maybe even create some interesting projects or ideas or research from it. Whereas on the same news, I had the GPT-4 generate a question, and here it's telling me, how can industries like finance, health, and recruitment enhance AI literacy, establish ethical guidelines, and develop training programs to facilitate smooth AI integration and deployment? To me, that sounds a bit more general. It's kind of like very generic. And also what I noticed is that when you ask the GPT-4 to generate some interesting research questions, it will always talk about ethical stuff. Like, I think it's biased automatically to be always ethical when it's thinking about AI. And this is what InfraNodus is not doing. It helps GPT-4 to get rid of that bias to always think about ethics, you know. And then I'll just give you another response here. For instance, here it generated me a question: how can AI-driven companies like Embold Health innovate in care navigation while addressing concerns about transparency and ethical use of data, particularly as they scale up for APOs or partnerships with entities like CoreWeave? So a very specific question. If you're into industry, you will really know what it's about. If you're not, then you know, you can research and get some really nice information from it. Whereas here it's just asking again, how can ethical and regulatory frameworks ensure AI's responsible use and innovation? I'm already start yawning, to be honest, when I read this automatically generated response from GPT-4. So it's always about ethics and so on. So if anything, this workflow that uses InfraNodus is a great way to get the AI rid of its bias towards always thinking about responsible use and ethics, you know. But then also the quality of the questions it generates are very interesting. And I actually really like using this workflow because it helps me understand, you know, the news, but in a way where I don't have to read through every news article, but rather I have to think about how to connect those news articles in an interesting way. And sometimes it's very fascinating questions, and I get a lot of really nice insights from them. And a few hundred people who are using these workflows on make.com, I think the same, because it's quite a popular workflow on Make. So I also encourage you to use it, and I will leave a link in the description to the video where you can set this up. You will just need to create a free Make account, and you need an account in InfraNodus, and then you can use the API key here. You just add it through the connection here. you will need to choose a connection and then add the key. And also there is some work that you will need to do to connect Telegram bot. Telegram doesn't make it so easy, but it's not so difficult as well. And I really guarantee you that the 10 minutes you will spend on setting this workflow up, most of the time it's going to be Telegram that will take it, but you will get really nice tool set because Telegram bots are great for getting informed about stuff in real time. So I think you will really like it. And this is also a great way to get into using InfraNodus API in an easy way where you don't have to code anything. The second use case I wanted to share with you is a bit more complex, but has far-reaching implications. So here I'm using our endpoints that are available through RapidAPI. RapidAPI is a kind of marketplace for various APIs, so it just makes it easier to access it. And the good thing about RapidAPI is that it provides you a scheme that is used to make this API request. So what you can do is just to copy this scheme and paste it into your favorite AI coding tool like Cursor or Windsurf AI, and that will make it much easier for your AI to actually generate API calls to InfraNodus. So this is also a great resource for you to have, and then you also have really nice descriptions of all the parameters here and some examples. And what I also really like is that on RapidAPI you can actually make test requests, so it's very easy to test run it and to sort of explore how it works. Here I'm going to use a new point that we created that is available here, generate AI advice. And then if you click on generate an AI question from an existing graph, so that means that you have an existing graph. And what I did here is that I uploaded the whole content of our support portal into here. The graph is called Support Nodus Labs. And you will see it's pretty interesting because it's basically like 500 pages or something, so a lot of content. And it's all visualized as a graph, right? And now I will be querying this very graph to get the results I need. So here InfraNodus already identifies the main topics inside. I can see that this content on our support portal is about data utilization, idea generation, AI content, and content gaps. So that's very good because it gives me like a very good idea of what the content is about. And then what will happen here is that once I use the AI API, I will actually be gaining access to those blind spots which are identified in the graph as well. So what's cool is that while using API, I can actually have a direct visual representation of how that AI is working. And that's pretty interesting because you see here it shows me, okay, you have a gap in content which is between those two topics, and then there is more topics. So I can access those gaps via API, but I can also visually see what's happening when this API is working. So that's very good for you as a developer or a researcher because you know what's going on, and you can also play around with the graph a bit. You can also clean the graph and kind of like make it perfectly suitable for your task. For instance, by removing some words that you don't want to be involved into idea generation by selecting them and hiding them, and then you have them in the list of stop words here. There, so when the graph is generated, they will not be used in generating responses, but basically you add the information first here. So it could be a support portal like in my case, or it could be like a bunch of research papers on a certain topic, but you add them all into one graph, then you write down the name of that graph, then you go back to RapidAPI, you write that name here in the name, so you have the body response, body request, and then you have the name of the context that you will be using, the model to use. GPT-4o, GPT-4o mini is good. AI topics should be set to true. Request mod should be question because you want to generate a research question. And then you have some parameters here also, but you can leave them default. The only thing that I'm going to do here is that I will say that I want to optimize for those structural gaps, and I will leave this field gap depth empty so that it generates like a random gap for me. And then I go back into the body, and then I click test endpoint. Also, I had to add my authorization key here in authorization, but I'm not going to click it because I don't want to expose it to you. So it's going to take a few seconds. What happens is that InfraNodus is querying that graph, finds the gap because that's the mode that we chose, and then it generates a question, and then the question is provided in AI advice endpoint here. So for instance, one of the questions that it proposes to me in relation to the support portal on InfraNodus is: how can community detection algorithms be utilized to identify and explore discourse gaps within topical clusters, enhancing the representation of underexplored topics in AI-driven network analysis? Actually, a very good question, and also very pertinent, because it's something like a feature of the tool, right? And it directly identified those two clusters. You see the ones I showed you, the cluster on AI and content gaps. I think it was this one, exactly. So it identified this cluster, AI and content gaps, and then it generated the question for me here that is attempting to bridge this gap. You can actually emulate this process if you click on this gap and then you go into AI question here. In this case, InfraNodus will generate this question for you inside the actual graph, right? So you can test it first with the graph, and then you go back here, and then this question is generated for you. But the good thing is that once you generate this question, you can integrate into your other AI automated workflows. For instance, you could send it back to an agent who would then explore research papers on the topics and then try to come up with some really interesting insights which you could then integrate into your product. Or you could do that. You could copy that question and then you go to another endpoint that we provide here. So the first one was generate a question to develop the discourse. The other one is generate a response to the question. So we actually treat it now as a prompt. We paste it here, so it's just going to be prompt. We say that we want to query the same context, but now the request mode is response, because we just want to get a response. We don't want to get the question, we want to get the response. And here in the parameters, I will also set it to optimize to develop the discourse, not find the gap, but to develop it further, right? So you will find more information about those parameters in our API documentation. But what happens here is that I'm just sending this prompt. So if you look at the previous request, we just had the context and the question mode. In this one, we have the context, and now we have the prompt. And what happens here is that InfraNodus uses its kind of internal GraphRAG. GraphRAG is the retrieval augmented generation, but powered by the underlying knowledge graph. So then basically the quality of responses that you get is much better because it knows all the connections underneath. So it's not just going to find similar content inside this text, but rather try to really think of the connections that it can create. And here we have one response here, and here we have a really nice response that explains to us how community detection algorithms can play an important role in identifying and exploring discourse gaps within topical clusters. Let's check what it's written actually. By leveraging those algorithms, we can enhance the representation of underexplored topics in AI-driven network analysis. Okay, so it can help us find more information about underexplored topics. Then it says these algorithms help in uncovering hidden connections between nodes and structures, the network based on community structures. This process not only reveals overlooked areas, but also facilitates the discovery of novel insights by bridging structural gaps between different clusters. So it takes information from the support portal and maybe helps me also see how I could write more about those topics and to connect those AI ideation stuff and the content on the gaps in the discourse, right? So it's also giving me ideas for more support articles I could create to sort of optimize this structure by connecting the clusters which are not yet connected. So as you can see, not only it gives me ideas for the product, not only it helps me research some topics that I could find interesting, but it also helps me optimize this structure by making it more connected and more coherent. So that's also another really good thing. And here it says by pinpointing conceptual gateways, which act as effective connectors between main ideas and peripheral topics, community detection algorithms enable users to expand the scope and depth of discourse. So actually what I just said. These gateways serve as entry points for embedding new ideas into conversations and initiating discussions on related subjects without relying solely on obvious terms. This is great. Through this approach, InfraNodus encourages users to explore diverse connections across various domains, fostering creativity and knowledge synthesis. Note how it mentioned InfraNodus where I actually didn't mention it here. This is because we're using this graph where InfraNodus is mentioned. So it managed to extract the information that we need and to give us a response that's highly relevant and that also stimulates our imagination further. So it's not just your normal chatbot-like experience, It's actually like talking to somebody who has a much better knowledge of this content and giving you some food for thought that you can use to actually come up with even more ideas. So I really like this workflow, and that's why I'm sharing it. And here it says, in essence, by utilizing community detection algorithms to identify discourse gaps within topical clusters, we can enrich AI-driven network analysis with a more comprehensive representation of interconnected ideas while shedding light on previously unexplored territories within the discourse landscape. I actually really love this response. In fact, I'm going to write an article for the support portal that will talk about those topics. So this will be the inspiration. But I'm going to write the article myself. I don't use AI to write articles because I don't like to read AI written stuff, but I like to use it for idea generation. That's great. All right, so one last thing as a bonus track, I want to show you something a bit funny. I also use Postman. Postman is like a tool that you can use on your own computer to make those API queries. And here I have this InfraNodus API endpoint, so it's exactly the same endpoint, exactly the same graph, but I'm asking a question that I was asking to another graph. And that question was asked to the graph that is about health, I think. So I was asking, can I drink a lot? Like, is it good to drink a lot? I meant water in this case. And then I make the same request. But here, look, because it's connected to the context that is about InfraNodus, it starts answering the question by saying drinking in moderation can offer social and health benefits, but overindulgence carries significant risks in the context of network analysis. So notice how it brings me back to the context that I'm analyzing with a question that has nothing to do with it, but now it tries to find an answer in relation to this question, but in the context of this data. And this is really interesting for research and for ideation, because you sometimes can ask all kinds of crazy stuff, but you will come up with really nice answers because AI is kind of forced to generate something for you. And sometimes it's very inspiring, this kind of mistakes like I did here, where I used a question that was not meant for this context, right? Consider how overconsumption might create gaps or disruptions in your well-being, both mentally and physically. So interesting, because it's talking about this idea of structural gaps, but now in relation to my psyche, or to how it also can create gaps in my physical experience, right? And here it says, just as data structures where less connected nodes indicate potential areas for exploration, those gaps in lifestyle choices could signal opportunities for improvement and balance. So it's basically telling me that sometimes you might actually get inspired from drinking because it will make you come up with some new interesting ideas because you will be disrupted, right? An unorthodox point of view, but very interesting because maybe somehow it's true. And then it says, analyzing your habits through a lens of insight and mindfulness, akin to using PKM tools with InfraNodus, might reveal non-obvious connections between behaviors and their consequences. This approach allows you to explore hidden patterns in your actions and encourages a more thoughtful relationship with consumption. So it's telling you, be careful, but if it happens, it's good because it can generate some new ideas. And that's actually a really nice link between how we can identify those gaps in content and how sometimes you need not to be too healthy to be able to do that. So I will leave you with this philosophical insight from InfraNodus, and I hope that you will try it out. You can try it on infranodus.com, and first you can just visualize the graph and see how it works through the interface, and then you can try the make.com workflow that is very easy to integrate, where you just use the ready-made scenarios that we have. I will link to them in the description to the video. And then next step, RapidAPI, and then you can use those more complex workflows and try to just use it on a topic that really interests you. So if you have like a bunch of research papers you're analyzing, a website, maybe even, you know, Google Scholar search results for a certain topic, you can actually import all this stuff in InfraNodus itself, and then try to use that graph to actually query it in that way without the interface, because sometimes it can be super interesting. And then of course you can build in those answers into your own AI workflows. You can even use make.com and then create more interesting workflows that will take the answer from InfraNodus. For example, we'll then use Perplexity AI to search for the answers for that topic on the internet and then deliver you the responses, and then you do something else with those responses. So the opportunities here are endless, and I'm really curious about what you're going to do with it. So please let me know also about some interesting use cases that you find for this. And if you have any questions about using it, also please do leave a comment to this video. I read all of them. I will be happy to respond. Thank you.